Good afternoon on this beautiful day in Two Rivers. I'm Two Rivers City Manager Greg Buckley, and on behalf of the City of Two Rivers American Legion Post 165, and Two Rivers Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 1248, I'm pleased to welcome you to this virtual Memorial Day ceremony. We're here filming it on the Wednesday before Memorial Day because in this 2020 pandemic world, we know that we're still very cautious about large group assemblies. But we want to thank the folks that came together today from our local American Legion and VFW posts, our police department honor guard. We thank also our parks crews for spiffing up Central Park here so it would look good today, and our film crew, Councilmember Darla Leclair and her son Jack, recording this to share on Memorial Day. Memorial Day is always a special day here in Two Rivers, and while this year we won't be gathering for a parade from downtown out to Calvary and Pioneer Rest Cemetery, Two Rivers never forgets. So we are gathered here to share this Memorial Day tribute with the community. At this point, I'll turn the podium over to the longtime chair of our Memorial Day activities in Two Rivers, Don Taddy. Now, just for a little background, I think most people that know Memorial Day in Two Rivers associate it with Mr. Taddy. He's been involved for 49 years now in this ceremony. He has chaired it for 21 years, since 1999, when he took over the reins from his dad, Luke Taddy. And Luke Taddy was in charge of Memorial Day observances in Two Rivers for about 30 years. Luke was a World War II vet. He served in Burma, India, and Alaska. And his son Don is a U.S. Army veteran as well. He had served in Germany during his service to our country. So with that, and with heartfelt thanks for his leadership and for everybody assembled here today, Event Chair Don Taddy.
Good day. My name is Don Taddy, as Greg said, and I'm a member of the American Legion Post 165, the American Legion, and also chairman for the Memorial Day observance in the city of Two Rivers. Today's program will be an abbreviated form of our usual observance due to COVID-19, and as always, is presented with the cooperation and assistance of the city of Two Rivers. A special thank you goes out this year to Mr. Greg Buckley, who was the driving force in today's program. Memorial Day is a day on which we pause to remember the sacrifices of the men and women of our armed forces. It's appropriate to remember our fellow Americans who are currently serving their country in the military, police departments, fire departments, and as our health professionals. We will begin our program today with a prayer by Post Chaplain, Mr. Ron Gordon.
Thank you, Don. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, in your hands are the living and the dead. Bless all those, our comrades, who have laid down their lives in the service of our country. May they rest in peace, and may perpetual light shine upon them. May the good work of seeking justice for the oppressed and peace for all mankind be rewarded with success, that their sacrifices shall not have been in vain. And may we never fail to remember the awesome cost of the freedom which we enjoy. All this we ask through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Reset, who? What the who? Afraid, who?
Reading the honor roll of veterans in the city of Two Rivers would be Mr. Dean Hervela and Mr. Chris DeCoke.
Thank you, Don. We will begin with the Civil War. Wilhelm Berger, Union Army, Jenkins Ferry, Arkansas, 1864. John Graham, Union Army, Tennessee, 1863. Henry Hacker, Union Army, Georgia, 1864. William Hess, Union Army, Pennsylvania, 1863. Heinrich Mandel, Jenkins Ferry, Arkansas, 1864. Matthias Reisenbegler, North Carolina, 1865. Frederick Salzman, Union Army, Fredericksburg, 1863. Christian Schmidt, Union Army, Virginia, 1863. Henry Smith, Union Army, Tennessee, 1862. Now to our World War I. William Allen, United States Army, France, 1918. Harry Bartz, United States Army, France, 1918. Charles Bugler, United States Army, France, 1918. Robert E. Burns, United States Army, France, 1918. Isidore Lesperance, United States Army, France, 1918. Ray Machen, United States Army, France, 1918. Robert Mulligan, United States Army, place unknown, 1918. We will continue with World War II. Roland Lemure, United States Navy, Europe, 1942. Francis Paulo, United States Army, New Guinea, 1942. Bert Hansen, United States Navy, Cape May, 1942. Stan Martin Cavage, United States Army, New Guinea, 1942. Joel Cray, United States Army, North Africa, 1943. Harvey Engelbrecht, United States Army, Sicily, 1943. Russ Gauthier, United States Navy, Gilbert Island, 1943. Joe DePius, United States Army, Sicily, 1943. Roland Lorenz, United States Army, North Africa, 1943. Floyd Wilgen, United States Army, New Guinea, 1943. George Larson, United States Coast Guard, in the Pacific, 1943. Robert Dugan, United States Navy, South Pacific, 1943. Leroy Shimalonis, United States Army, Burma, 1944. Peter Karnichka, United States Army, New Guinea, 1944. Joe Wisniewski, United States Army, Italy, 1944. Glenn Groen, United States Marine Corps, Saipan, 1944. Fred Yeager, United States Army, Italy, 1944. Andrew Miller, United States Army, Germany, 1944. Oliver Scavarni, United States Army, Germany, 1944. Earl Erickson, United States Army, Belgium, 1944. George Watson, United States Army, New Guinea, 1944. Roy Krenke, United States Army, D-Day in France, 1944. Alvin Erickson, United States Army, France, 1944. Orny Botcher, United States Army, Philippines, 1945. Eugene Ali, United States Army, Germany, 1945. Ken Jakubowski, United States Navy, Okinawa, 1945. Melvin Hurley, United States Army, Belgium, 1945. Thomas Hardegree, United States Navy, South Pacific, 1945. Lloyd Tomey, United States Army, Germany, 1945. Moses Rumdeen, United States Army, Germany, 1945. Edward Lipke, United States Army, France, 1945. Fred Watson, United States Army, Germany, 1945. Norbert Kowalski, United States Army, Belgium, 1945. Now our Korean vets. John Albrecht, United States Army, Korea, 1950. Wayne Krieger, United States Army, Korea, 1951. Richard Schultz, United States Army, Korea, 1951. Paul Blazek, United States Army, Korea, 1951. Elmer Albrecht, United States Army, Korea, 1951. Now to our Vietnam vets. Alan K. Kook, United States Marine Corps, Vietnam, 1966. Robert Ruminski, United States Marine Corps, Vietnam, 1967. William Behrens, United States Army, Vietnam, 1968. Thomas Blaha, United States Marine Corps, Vietnam, 1968. Edward Bershinsky, United States Army, Vietnam, 1968. Carl Weber, United States Marine Corps, Vietnam, 1968. Thomas A. Sagan, Navy Seabee, Vietnam, 1965. And to the Iraq War, Sean Novak, United States Army, in Iraq in 2006. The next list of names, these are veterans from the city of Two Rivers who have passed away since Memorial Day 2019 up to May 18, 2020. Dean Sorensen, United States Army, June of 2019. Eldon Rhea, Army National Guard, June 2019. Glenn Shambo, United States Army, 2019. Robert Bruhl, United States Air Force, 2019. Richard Baltnick, United States Navy, 2019. Alan Spearbarker, United States Marine Corps, 2019. Marvin Koch, United States Army, July 2019. Louise Stunnell, United States Navy, August 2019. Gordon Kozer, United States Air Force, 2019. James Beth, United States Army, August 2019. Lee Bruchert, United States Air Force, September 2019. Gary Swoboda, United States Coast Guard, October 2019. Conrad Hardina, United States Air Force, October 2019. Denton Schmidt, United States Army, 2019. Irvin Krizek, United States Army, November 2019. Gary Parker, United States Navy, November 2019. Daniel Shimmick, United States Army, November 2019. Nick Leclair, United States Army, November 2019. Leroy Staff, United States Army, December 2019. Adam Durbin, United States Army, December 2019. Walter Fink, United States Navy, December 2019. Dr. Roy Frank, United States Navy, December 2019. Daniel McKenna, United States Air Force, January 2020. Edward McGlynn, United States Army, January 2020. Alan Wergen, United States Army, March of 2020. George Struck, United States Air Force and the National Guard, March of 2020. Alan Resba, United States Army, March of 2020. Irvin Peterson, United States Air Force, March of 2020. Maynard Muzzy Bruce, United States Army, April 2020. Gilbert Kinderknecht, United States Navy, April 2020. That concludes my list. In closing, I would like to quote from a statement that we recite to surviving members at a military honors funeral here in town. And it goes like this. Many years ago, a call was made. These individuals answered that call to serve their country. Their self was forgotten for a cause of greater good as they marched away with abiding faith in their God, in their country, and our flag. And I ask thee, O Lord, where come such brave individuals as these? May they rest in peace. On behalf of the American Legion Post 165, VFW Post 1248, thank you for being here for our bell ceremony. I'd like to say a special thank you to the City of Two Rivers Police Honor Guard for being here, standing with my fellow brother and sister vets. Thank you.
We're fortunate to have two speakers today for our virtual Memorial Day observance, one here in person and one joining us by video. Each will share some amazing history on young men from Two Rivers who went off to fight in World War II, a war that ended 75 years ago this month in Europe. VE Day, or Victory in Europe Day, was first celebrated, and it was celebrated by the free world on May 8 of 1945. The war in the Pacific dragged on, and victory in that Pacific theater, VJ Day, or Victory over Japan Day, would not be celebrated until October of 1945. And while we pause today to remember, indeed to salute the sacrifice of the veterans of all of America's wars, everyone who's given all so that we might enjoy the freedom and prosperity that we too often take for granted, this year, the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II, is especially emblematic of the sacrifices and the post-war achievement of that greatest generation, a few of whom we treasure still having in our midst. You think about it, our nation at that time had 130 million people. Nearly 300,000 American servicemen and women gave their lives in World War II. Nearly 10% of American families had a family member who served in active duty in the military. Hardly any household in our land was untouched in one way or another. We came together for common sacrifice and created the heart of what was and is the American century as a leader in the free world. So we salute that generation along with all others who have given all in sacrifice for our country. Our speaker here in Central Park today is Major General Tim Zadalis, United States Air Force retired. Major Zadalis retired in October of 2017 and returned to this area after a distinguished career in the U.S. Air Force. His mother, Rita, lives here in Two Rivers, and her roots in our area run deep. She grew up on a farm in Two Creeks, and in 1954 met a young man named Bob Zadalis, who was stationed at the U.S. Air Force General Surveillance Radar Station out in Two Creeks. Now, that station was only active for about 3 years, from late 1954 to late 1957. But it brought together a couple whose marriage lasted for over 45 years. Tim's dad passed away a few years ago, but his mom lives here in Two Rivers, and he has a sister nearby in Denmark. His dad's 33-year Air Force career took them around the nation and around the world, and Tim exceeded his dad's service in the Air Force by 1 year. Major General Zadalis' career took him to assignments in Air Force bases all around the U.S. and the world. In the latter years of his active duty career, his service included serving from June of 2013 to June of 2015 as commander of the 618th Air Operations Center, a tanker airlift control center at Scott Air Force Base in Illinois. Then from July of 2015 to 2017, he served as vice commander for U.S. Air Forces in Europe and Air Forces Africa, based at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. I give you, for today's address here in Central Park, Major General Zadalis. Tim, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley, for the tremendous and humbling introduction. It's very fitting today that we are gathered here, and in thinking about my words, I wanted to start with a quote from Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It was a warning to all about not to forget Memorial Day. I think it would have been easy for us to have forgotten during the midst of this pandemic. President Roosevelt's words were, "Those who have long enjoyed such privileges as we enjoy forget in time the men and women who have died to win them." We are proving here today that we are not going to forget those who gave their last full measure for our freedoms. Few know that the roots of Memorial Day trace back to 1866. Just 1 year after the Civil War, small gatherings occurred around the nation where flowers were placed on the graves to honor the dead in both the North and the South. Our nation healed from the divisions of the Civil War through ceremonies like these, and they became commonplace. While many cities claim to be the first to have the earliest recorded ceremony, one of the earliest, and I believe one of the most poignant, occurred in Columbus, Mississippi, where a group of women gathered to lay flowers on the Confederate soldiers' graves who had died at the Battle of Shiloh. Nearby were the graves of the Union soldiers. They were dismayed at the emptiness of their graves, and they laid flowers there too. It was a powerful moment, a powerful symbol of healing and respect. By 1868, Decoration Day was established by a group of Union veterans And by the end of the 19th century, the 30th of May was chosen as Decoration Day. The exact reason why the 30th was chosen is not known, but many believe that it was chosen because on the 30th, across the United States, flowers are in bloom. At the end of World War I, Decoration Day, or Memorial Day as we know it, was expanded to include all of the fallen of American wars. In 1971, it finally became a federal holiday, and what we know as Memorial Day was formally established. And most recently, Congress passed and the President signed in the year 2000 into public law the National Moment of Remembrance Act. And in that act, it asks every American to pause in silence for 1 minute at 3 p.m. local time on Memorial Day. And I hope that each of us remember to pause for 1 minute this coming Memorial Day. As a part of our Memorial Day remembrance, we gathered here to pay tribute to the 63 fallen from Two Rivers and to hear their names read. And it is only fitting that on the 75th anniversary of victory in Europe that I share with you a story of one of the 63, a Two Rivers resident. A Two Rivers resident and the recipient of our nation's highest honor, the Medal of Honor. His name was Staff Sergeant Andrew Miller. Andrew Miller was born in Manitowoc and moved to Two Rivers with his new wife, Mamie. Together they settled just down the street from where we stand at 2116 Washington Street, and they walked the same streets that you and I do. Sergeant Miller is one of only 63 Medal of Honor recipients from Wisconsin. As World War II raged, Andrew Miller did what many had done. He stepped forward and enlisted in the United States Army. He was assigned to Company G of the 377th Infantry Regiment, and by the fall of 1944 was a squad leader in the 377th in the fast-moving Allied advance across France and Germany. His Medal of Honor citation begins here, and it is incredibly inspiring to read. For his Medal of Honor was not awarded for a single heroic event, but rather a series of heroic events that occurred from the 16th to the 29th of November, 1944. His citation begins with his heroic actions near Waiopie, France during the battle in which his men were pinned down by intense machine gun fire. He ordered his men to remain in cover as he alone moved forward. Single-handedly, he silenced 2 machine gun positions and took 7 prisoners. The next day, again platoon under heavy fire was forced to withdraw. However, Sergeant Miller remained behind, and he fought single-handedly, silenced the enemy guns, and allowed the advance to continue. His citation continues on November 19th. He led an attack on an enemy barracks. Under covering fire, Sergeant Miller crawled to an open window, crawled in, and once inside, captured 7 German riflemen and enabled his squad to enter the building, taking 75 prisoners in the process. Shortly thereafter, Sergeant Miller volunteered with 3 others to capture a second building. It was Sergeant Miller who was hoisted into the open window, only to find himself surrounded by 4 Gestapo agents. The Gestapo was a Nazi secret police, and they were the ones forcing the German soldiers to fight an unwinnable battle. Sergeant Miller single-handedly convinced them to surrender, and the building was secured, saving numerous American and German lives. The very next day, Sergeant Miller volunteered again to silence another gun position. He climbed up the stairs of the building to a firing position with his bazooka in hand. On his way up the stairs, he was hit by a rifle grenade. Undaunted, he continued and accomplished his mission, again silencing the gun position. And then the very next day, at Metz, France, he again volunteered to silence yet another machine gun position, and in the process, captured 12 more prisoners. And finally, his citation reads, on 29 November, near Kirpix-Hemmersdorf, Germany, as Company G was climbing a hill, under withering machine gun fire, the troops were pinned down. Inspired by Sergeant Miller's leadership, the platoon pressed forward. And Sergeant Miller's leadership inspired another platoon in the area, and they pushed forward against the odds. The enemy position was smothered, but it came at a cost. Sergeant Miller was killed in the advance. His Medal of Honor was presented to his widow, Mamie, and Two Rivers is recorded as his home of record. His remains are buried in the Lorraine American Cemetery and Memorial near Saint-Avold, France. His headstone is a marble cross, like one of thousands in the cemetery. However, his is different. It is adorned with gold letterings, and it is inscribed with the words, Wisconsin, and the Medal of Honor. Sergeant Miller's actions typify the valor of all 63 fallen from Two Rivers, and all of whom have given their lives for our nation. Each of our cities fallen has an inspiring story of sacrifice, and on this Memorial Day, we pause to honor them and to say thank you. Say thank you to our hometown heroes who at one time called Two Rivers home, just as we do. I'll finish with a powerful quote from General George S. Patton that is fitting for this day. He said, "It is foolish to mourn those who have died. Rather, we should thank God that such men and women have lived." May God bless all of our fallen, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
Thank you for sharing that message, General Zadalis. Also part of our virtual Memorial Day observance is a second address, a Memorial Day video message from Minnesota, presented by Patrick Dewane. Patrick is the grandson of Lieutenant Colonel Matt Konop, U.S. Army of Two Rivers, who served in World War II in Europe as part of the 2nd Infantry Division of Patton's 3rd Army. Matt Konop was the grandson of Czech immigrants who settled in Stangleville, Wisconsin in the 1860s, and he grew up speaking Czech at home. That's precisely the reason he was selected to lead an advance party from the 2nd Infantry who swept through the western portion of Czechoslovakia late in the war in April and May of 1945, as that region's German occupiers fled or were taken prisoner. And entering his grandparents' ancestral hometown of Domažlice, he announced the town's liberation from the Nazis. The people of Domažlice hoisted him on their shoulders, proclaiming, "We are liberated by one of our own." Now, Patrick Dewane, grandson of Matt Konop, has shared his grandfather's World War II experience in a one-man stage show, The Accidental Hero. We've seen it performed here in Two Rivers at the Capitol in Manitowoc. It's been performed all over the U.S. I've been fortunate enough to see it presented as well in the Czech Republic in Domažlice just last year. The Accidental Hero and Patrick Dewane have been key in reestablishing that historic link between our small city and the heart of the North American continent and that beautiful historic small city in the heart of the European continent. For 2 years now, our cities have been sister cities. On our City Hall, you'll see a plaque that is a relief version of the photo showing Lieutenant Colonel Konop being raised on the shoulders of the people of Domažlice. That is a duplicate donated by the Konop family of a similar plaque on the front of the Hruška building. That was Matt Konop's grandmother's maiden name in the beautiful historic town square in Domažlice, where some of the buildings date to the 12th century. We have that historic link that we enjoy. I'd also mention that on the front of the Domažlice Town Hall is a plaque commemorating the liberation of the Czech Republic and their city by the glorious American Army, April 5th, 1945. Patrick Dewane shares some of that history with us. Thank you.
were supposed to come in here through where the bluff sort of goes down, up taking the road to Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer. It was all carefully planned. That's what was supposed to happen. Well, when things went wrong and they were drifting miles away, no GPS, no reliable radio communication, all hell was breaking loose everywhere. They had to take the boat parallel to the shore, looking for the landmarks of where Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer was. So when they did, and there were, you could see the Luftwaffe and our aircraft, our Air Force engaged in battle. It was the day after D-Day, but it was still a hell of a fight. And so they're riding parallel, finding this place, finding this spot. Then they turned toward it, and they could only get into water that was 6 feet deep. That's why they had to jump into the water and wade to shore. When they got here, when they got to this little stretch of French beach, there wasn't a cleanup crew from the day before. Dead bodies, body parts, and all sorts of debris. At the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, they have an exhibit of debris found on the beach. And the one that always gets me is that they sent these guys over with packets of letters, stationery. And they would find on the beach, washed ashore, thousands of unwritten letters. Young men who didn't make it up that hill. And the next letter home was a telegram saying, "We're sorry to inform you." Toothbrushes, boots, Bibles, all kinds of shit on this beach. On Grandpa's first day of war.
What a 10 who? Forward, who? Right, who? Ready? Aim! Fire! 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 Forward, who? Left, hey! Present, who?
While the storm clouds gather far across the sea, let us swear allegiance to a land that's free. Let us all be grateful for a land so fair, as we raise our voices in a solemn prayer. America, America, America. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountain